I'm Andrew Gosser, Christian, husband, father, farmer, recovering politician. Filling in for the Jameson Haygood Show today. Here we go. Welcome back to the Jameson Haygood Show, second hour.
Testing one.
I'm really excited because we have on the line Minnesota State Senator Glenn Gruenhagen, who's going to give us his personal insight into what it's like to live under Tim Walz. Senator, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Senator, we're going to talk about Tim Walz, and before we get into Tim, we'd really like to learn a little bit about yourself. So if you go ahead and give us a little bit about how long you've been a senator and what you're doing up there in the great state of Minnesota and Carver County, we'd appreciate it.
Just a quick background. I'm married, served in the Marine Corps for 2 years. So I'm a veteran, and also raised on a dairy farm, and I've served in the legislature now 6 terms as a House member, as a House representative, and then 1 term as a senator. I was just elected, so I've done 2 years as a state senator in Minnesota. Most of it under Democratic control, either Governor Dayton and now Governor Tim Walz.
So you have a pretty good idea of what the governor is like. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've seen from your perspective under Governor Walz's leadership?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the last 2 years have been especially trying, if you believe, if you're a constitutional conservative, which I am, and the majority of Republicans are. They have taken us in a direction of radical leftist extremism. Some would call it Marxism. But there's several areas of concern that I would like to touch on today, and the direction we're going both in our state and nation. And if Governor Walz and Kamala Harris are elected president, vice president, my strong concern is they're going to be taking us in the same direction nationally that we've seen in Minnesota. So the first area I'd like to talk about is health care access, because I believe it is a concern for all of us.
Amen.
You know, I was on a Zoom meeting. First I'd like to say Minnesota has been consistently ranked as one of the best health care access and health care doctor and hospital systems in the country, if not in the world. We're the home of the Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester. But I was on a Zoom meeting with 6 hospital CEOs, and they expressed their concern last session about the direction of more and more government control of health care and reimbursement and less private health insurance access under Obamacare. Here I'll give some specifics to your audience. According to the hospital CEOs here in Minnesota, when they have a patient come in on Medicaid or Minnesota Care, which we have here in the state, they're for every $2 of expenses, they're reimbursed at about $1. So they lose money on those patients. Again, government reimbursement. Under Medicare, on average, for every $2 of expenses in the hospital, they get reimbursed about $1.50 on average. With private health insurance, for every $2 of expenses, they get reimbursed about $2.50. So they actually make a little money. The concern that all of them expressed is that there's more and more government reimbursement, which they're losing money on, especially with the baby boomers retiring, and less private insurance, which it seems like Obamacare was designed to drive up premiums and deductibles and create less access for. Just a minute.
Senator, while you're talking about that, that's like one of the big things here in Mississippi is that they're trying to get Medicare and Medicaid here into our local systems. And what you're saying is that in Minnesota, that's not really happening at all. It's having the reverse effect.
Amen. That's correct. People need to understand private insurance has bailed out the losses of government programs since the mid-'60s when Medicare and Medicaid were started. And because you had the baby boomers, about 77 million in the workforce, that worked okay, and fewer elderly people, that worked okay. The problem is it was called cost shifting, where hospitals and doctors would cost shift their losses under government reimbursement to private insurance. However, now the baby boomers are beginning to retire by the millions, and therefore we're having more, and there's fewer young people behind them. Part of the reason is abortion. We've killed 64 million unborn children. Therefore, they don't show up in the workforce.
Yep.
And we don't have the number of people to pay in for the baby boomers retiring now. In fact, there was a national paper a couple of years ago came out with a frontline newspaper article that I saved. And here's the title of the article, right on the front page. "We're busted, baby. Who'll foot the bill for the aging populations?" And it talks about the demographic changes where the baby boomers are retiring and we don't have enough young people behind us.
What has been, Senator, really quick, what has been Tim Walz' part in all of this in Minnesota?
He advocates for single payer in the state of Minnesota. So they've actually undermined the private market, more so than even Obamacare did, which already undermined the private market to a certain degree. So he has been an advocate for it. Kamala Harris had made statements about Medicare for all. And so Governor Tim Walz and Kamala are going to be pushing government reimbursement, which I have explained doctors and hospitals actually lose money on. So the result is you're going to see less access to health care. And one of the primary reasons is the low reimbursement of government health plans.
Well, Senator, they say that the definition of insanity is repeating something over and over again, but expecting a different result. I've seen this destroy Illinois. I see what it's doing in Minnesota, and I don't want it to happen here in Mississippi. So to all those Republican legislators, senators, I know Governor often tunes in every once in a while. We do not want this single-payer tax or single-payer system in our health care. We want to improve health care, and we need to. But under Tim Walz in Minnesota, it's definitely not having the effect that they talk about on NBC, CNN, MSNBC, etc. Senator, what has he been like for law enforcement?
I'll get to that in just a little bit, but I'd like to finish up on health care.
Okay.
There's even more concerning things coming in our healthcare system here in Minnesota. There's been a study that in 2030, we are going to be short doctors in the state of Minnesota of 2,260 doctors short in the state of Minnesota. Part of it is not new doctors coming in, and a lot of doctors under Obamacare are actually retiring early. So again, by 2030, according to this study, we're going to be 2,260 doctors short at a time where we're having baby boomers retiring and the healthcare needs are more. So you're going to see less access to quality healthcare. Also, just to go back to those CEOs of hospitals, according to the lead lobbyist for the Hospital Association down at the state of Minnesota, we now have 67% of our hospitals losing money in the state of Minnesota. We also have a lot of nursing homes losing money and closing. So this is the direction that Kamala and Governor Walz want to take us, government reimbursement health care. And it's going to cost trillions. It's going to have a huge bureaucracy, and the doctor-patient relationship is going to suffer. One additional thing, if you look at Obamacare and your private health insurance, one of the reasons under Obamacare premiums went so high, there's a number of them, but over a third, if you do your research, over a third of your premium cost is connected to government bureaucracy and insurance bureaucracy and healthcare bureaucracy. So you're paying 30 to 40 cents of every healthcare dollar, not to the doctor-patient relationship, but to this huge bureaucracy of networks and micromanaging the doctor-patient relationship, and it's just a huge burden. Now, I have a bill, SF-883, that would actually eliminate networks and bureaucracy and empower patients to see the doctor of their choice. It would also free the doctor from a huge amount of bureaucracy and paperwork. I almost got it passed in the Senate last year, but was short one vote. The one other thing in terms of drugstores, what we've seen in Minnesota, we have pharmacy benefit managers. That's a big name for bureaucracy between the drug manufacturers and the drugstores. Well, the PBMs have been on a march to eliminate independent drugstores. They want to control everything. In Minnesota in 1996, we had 550 independent drugstores. Today, in 2023, we're down to 156. And a lot of these are in small towns across Minnesota where seniors do not have access without a long drive or through the mail order, which many of them are confused by. So again, Governor Walz, and Kamala will support this, I'm sure, are taking us in the direction of rationing and less health care access. And we need to empower the private health care market. You need a strong private health care market to support the losses on the government reimbursement plans.
Well, Senator, you're preaching to the choir. We've seen examples of this in inner city Chicago, San Francisco, and I'm assuming Minneapolis, St. Paul area, where the only drugstores in town were the Walgreens or the CVS, and they're moving out because they're getting looted and robbed all the time. They can't make any money, so the business just leaves, and now you've got a pharmaceutical desert, per se, well, with the exception of all the Chinese fentanyl that gets pumped in there. But this has been an awesome conversation on healthcare. Senator, can we take a break, and can you hold over for the next segment?
Sure.
All right, we're going to take a quick break on WYAB. We'll be right back. Welcome back to WYAB, Jameson Haygood Show. Andrew Gosser, guest substituting for Jameson today. We're giving out homework. We have the receipts. And we're on the phone with Minnesota State Senator Glenn Gruenhagen, 17th District up there in Minnesota. And in the last segment, we were talking about everything that Tim Walz did to the medical segment of the economy up in Minnesota. And, Senator, you wanted to bring in some other segments. Could you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd like to touch on abortion and also the transgender issue. The other thing people need to understand about Governor Walz and what he'll bring to the national level, and I believe Kamala will support it. Here in the state of Minnesota, we had 2 laws against the practice of pedophilia, okay? And Governor Walz and the Democrats repealed one of the pedophile laws that we had on the books.
What?
It was a law in our human rights statute that would prohibit that you could discriminate against a pedophile based on housing or hiring or things like that. They repealed that. So now we only have one law left, one law outlawing pedophilia, and that's the actual act. So, you look at Governor Walz and Kamala, well, Governor Walz in particular, he tends to be pro-pedophile. And I think people need to understand that when they're voting. Because, again, he repealed one of the 2 pedophile laws that we had on the books to protect children. And that was a huge disgrace as far as I'm concerned. They also added to our human rights statute gender expression, which now you cannot discriminate on housing or hiring on individuals who are drag queens, okay? So we know we have drag queen story hour. Here in Minnesota, it happened where drag queens read to small children in a library. I mean, this is just simply degrading our society
It's
and
sick.
our children, and I believe it should stop.
I couldn't agree with you more, Senator. And, just getting on that, we have that here in Mississippi. We're doing a lot of things, and Gabrielle Olivier is out there preaching against it every time that they try to do the drag queen story hour here in downtown Jackson. And I'm not going to give them any more credit than that. But that's scary to me that Tim Walz supports basically pedophilia, and it's speechless. I mean, it's terrible. What else do you got with that issue, sir?
Okay, then I like to switch to abortion, because there's a lot of denial and confusion on what happened in Minnesota on the abortion issue. The media, the left-wing national media has played into it, and of course, Governor Walz and Kamala have also confused the issue. Number one, we passed last biennium, last two sessions, we passed House File 1. What House File 1 did, it legalized abortion right up to the moment of birth, 9th month, okay? You can abort a child. And we had over 60 amendments, the Republicans did, to put some limits on that here in the state of Minnesota, and the Democrats rejected every single one. So when the national media says there's no state that allows abortion up to the moment of birth, and by the way, they also changed the law from babies who survive abortion from giving them, according to the statute, life-saving medical care. They changed it to comfort care, and therefore you can actually let the baby die. And by the way, we had a report from a government agency, about 6 to 8 babies have passed away in the last couple of years who died after they were aborted. And the other thing the Democrats did, they removed the reporting requirements by medical facilities on reporting to state agencies on infants that were born alive after they failed abortion. So we now have euthanasia legalized, infanticide legalized in the state of Minnesota. So again, one of the ways you can tell Governor Walz is lying on this issue, his lips are moving, okay? So we need people need to understand this before they vote, that that's where they want to take the nation. And I consider it to be despicable to abort children right up to the moment of birth, and even to allow them to die if they survive abortion.
Senator, I can tell you that in Mississippi, we have the Dobbs decision here. Mississippi led the charge against federal abortion, and now it's kicked back to the states since Mississippi did that. And what I want to add to this conversation is that this is so pertinent to everybody listening to this radio show, because if we do not go against Tim Walz and Kamala, that's going to come to Mississippi. It might not get here for 20, 30 years. Politics is a long game, as you know, Senator, and they'll do little onesie, twosie things here and there, and they will set up a play for 15, 20 years down the line. Now is the time to put an end to this and get rid of Tim Walz. And we love babies. We want to have people have babies with a mother and a father, and when they're born, they're either a boy or a girl. It's not what do they feel like today, because you're either a boy or a girl. You're not a dinosaur. You're not a cat. You were born a boy or a girl, and we have to go back and combat this nonsense. Go ahead, Senator.
Amen. It's, the transgender movement is anti-science and anti-biology, but that's another. I'll comment a little more on that a little bit later. But just to finish up with abortion, the other thing pro-abortion women have to understand is that abortion and pornography sends a certain message to a certain percentage of men to sexually exploit women. That's what they have to understand. So it actually degrades and objectifies women rather than building respect and care for women, because that's what abortion and pornography does. The other thing I'd like to say is Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood, and she made statements, and by the way, you can go to my website, GlennGruenhagen.com, and I wrote a manifesto to end racism in America. and you can read, it's several pages long there, and you can read that. But Margaret Sanger made the quote, and it's in my paper, A Manifesto to End Racism in America, that she did not want it to get out that they wanted to seriously reduce or eliminate the Negro population.
It's a fact.
That's Margaret Sanger. So Planned Parenthood is a white supremacist and racist organization. And I told the senators, the DFL senators on the Senate floor when they voted for this House File 1 to allow abortion right up to the moment of birth, I said, if you vote for this, you're supporting white supremacist and racist legislation. So when the Democrats call us white supremacists and racists, they're the ones that are actually guilty of supporting white supremacy and racism. So they need to look at the four fingers pointed back at them. And that's what Governor Walz and Kamala are going to be promoting nationwide, a white supremacist and racist agenda, which puts them in the category of being white supremacists and racist, not the Republicans.
Yep.
Okay?
Senator, do you have that paper, or do you have an X account where you can promote that paper, where you can tweet it, and then I'll retweet it back up?
If you send me your email, I can email it to you, too.
Awesome. I'll make sure that we get that, because I want to make sure that people see that, because when we get on the radio air and we start saying things, people want to do their research and back that up. And there are a lot of really good people who are center-left who have never heard the truth about Planned Parenthood. And when you start throwing these facts at them, number one, they get angry, and then they get confused, and then they end up start changing their opinions on things because of the facts. And the facts is that Margaret Sanger definitely had an agenda against the black population of America. And that's what gave us Planned Parenthood. It's not even debatable. But we don't like talking about that, because we have the one thing that the political left does better than anything is they use ridicule and self-censorship of conservatives. And we can't be that way. Senator, we got to take another break. Do you want to do one more segment?
Yes, I'd like to. There's a number. One other thing on abortion, I'd just say.
15 seconds.
Some Democrats say they don't support Margaret Sanger anymore. But in New York, in New York City, according to published reports, they abort more black babies, Planned Parenthood does, than are born. That's white supremacy and racism. That's the Democratic Party.
And that's Tim Walz. You're listening to WYAB. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Good Fight on WYAB 103.9 FM. Andrew Gosser filling in for Jamison Haygood. On the phone with Minnesota State Senator Glenn Gruenhagen. And just real quick before we get into the next topic, Senator, just got a flash poll pop up in front of me. Trump is now at 53.7%, and Kamala Harris has dropped to 45.9%. That's a 2.9% shift for Trump and a negative 2.6% shift for Kamala Harris. So we just got to continue to get the word out there. And Senator, I'll just give you the floor. We got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure that you can talk about all the changes that Tim Walz is overseeing in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, I'll try to summarize, but just one more comment on abortion. You know, I would encourage your listeners, especially those who are pro-choice, to look up Bernard Nathanson. Bernard Nathanson founded the National Abortion Rights League in the 60s in New York City. He oversaw over 76,000 abortions. He personally did over 5,000 abortions. But Bernard Nathanson became pro-life later in his life. And what he did, he made a documentary, which you could find on the Internet, The Silent Scream. And it shows a medical instrument going after an unborn child's late term and how that child tries to get away from that instrument until it finally succumbs. Again, yes, Bernard Nathanson became pro-life later in his life. He passed away, I think, in 2011. God rest his soul. But the interesting thing about Bernard Nathanson, when he started the National Abortion Rights League in New York, guess who was one of his major donors? Hugh Hefner. Okay,
my goodness,
ladies, think about that. Hugh Hefner, the promoter of pornography, is subsidizing an organization that wants to kill the consequence of the sexual exploitation of women. please think that through and what abortion really means to yourself and your unborn child. The other thing we talked about was the economic consequences. You know, the whole reason we could do Social Security and Medicare is because we had 77 million baby boomers in the workforce and we had fewer older people. Well, now because they're killing 64 million unborn children, letting millions of illegals in, we can't afford that anymore. And, you know, that now we have projections that Social Security is going to go broke and Medicare is going to go broke. Well, when you kill your own children, there is an economic consequence to that. Now, I believe in the exceptions, you know, life of the mother, rape and incest, but we really need to put some restrictions, especially on second and third trimester. Also, there needs to be consequences for boyfriends who get their young girls pregnant and then pressure them to get an abortion. Remember what Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was quoted as. He said abortion is freeing for men. Yeah, you kill the consequence of the sexual exploitation of women and your responsibility to provide for that child. That's what's going on. That's what Governor Walz and Kamala stand for. Please consider that when you're voting. We're killing our own economic future.
Yep.
The other thing I'd like to mention just quickly is that transgenderism. We passed laws where you can take a child away from the parent. That's HF 146 and SF 2995. A judge can take a child who wants to transition, a minor child, and give them puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and sterilize them as a minor without parental permission. Think about that. So the Democrats are eroding parental authority over their children. That is a travesty, and that is contrary to the principles our country was founded on. Please, please think that through when you vote.
Senator, and you know, in England and in Europe, they've completely blocked the dissemination of puberty blockers to teenagers and minors because of the deleterious effects that it has on the minor child. We are giving responsibility to a minor child when they're not even sure what they think. They haven't had life's experience yet. They haven't had that ability to actually grow up and live a quote-unquote normal upbringing. Now, all of our upbringings are different, but there's a general trajectory that we all have. And it's just shameful. Correct. It's just shameful that you think in Mississippi, we'd be going nuts if a judge came into our house and told us that they're going to take away our kid. But that's coming if we get Kamala and we get Tim. So I just wanted to inject that in there. Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I asked a medical doctor who's a state senator when they passed a law to mandate health care and government coverage for this, for the puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mutilating surgery on minor children. I asked the state senator, who was a doctor, does that gender-affirming care treatment change your XX or your XY chromosome? And his response on the Senate floor was, I refuse to answer that question. Think about that. What you're doing, this is eugenics. This is Margaret Sanger. This is what grew very popular in Europe prior to World War II. I mean, that's what they're promoting again, the sterilization of what they consider to be less than fit human beings. We defeated this once before. We can defeat it again. Yep. And parents need to understand that if Governor Walz and Kamala are elected president and vice president, they will be promoting this agenda to take your child away from parents and give them this treatment. This is This is child abuse, and it borders on treason, in my opinion.
You want to know something? And these are the tough decisions and tough discussions that we have to have here in Mississippi, because we're down here on the Gulf Coast. Senator, it's 81 degrees outside. It's sunny. I can see the nice green trees out there. We don't have any trees changing colors yet. And we are in our own little Mississippi bubble. But on the outside, there is a giant blue bubble that is trying to infringe upon our way of life. And we have to fight
Amen.
that. And Senator, I'd like to ask you one question. How do Republicans outside of Mississippi view Republicans inside of Mississippi, like our state legislature, our governor. Do you view us as really conservative, somewhat conservative? How do you look at Mississippi?
Well, I don't have a lot of information, but generally speaking, you're somewhat conservative to very conservative down in Mississippi, and appreciate that. I mean, the majority of you. That doesn't mean everybody is, but
yep. And I didn't want to put you on the spot there, Senator, but the reason I do that is because I'm not from Mississippi originally, and there's this expectation that Mississippi leads the way in the conservative fight, whether that be the Dobbs decision in abortion, whether that be transgenderism. We lead the way, and we need to make sure that our state senators and state legislators understand that we lead the way. We have our decisions that we make in Mississippi have impacts in Minnesota, in Illinois, in New York, in Virginia, in Florida. That's all I wanted to get that in there. Go ahead, Senator.
Yep. Well, and then the last thing, the Democrats promote a culture of death. Republicans are promoting a culture of life. Choose which way you want to go. They also want to pass, they didn't yet in Minnesota, but they also introduced and almost passed assisted suicide. So they want to kill off the innocent. And when it comes to public safety and law enforcement, they want to defund the police, and they want to let the guilty go free. They pass laws to release criminals back into society. And Kamala Harris, when we had the fall of Minneapolis and all that rioting with George Floyd, she was raising money with the Minnesota Freedom Fund to let the criminals right back out onto the street. So they kill the innocent and let the guilty go free, and then they turn around and we pass restrictions on gun ownership. So I used to think they just wanted restrictions, but they want to take your guns away, the Democrats do. So, don't let them do that. And if Kamala and Tampon Timmy, we call him, because he passed a law to put tampons in the boys' bathrooms in our public schools,
disgusting.
4 to 12, they are going to go after your guns and gun ownership, regardless of what they say. Don't believe what they say. Look at what they're actually doing. And they're leading us in a path to confiscate all of our guns because they want to impose a Marxist socialist agenda on our country, contrary to our Constitution and the principles that our country was founded on that led to a better future for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. Please, those of you who are Christians, pray and make sure you vote, because this is a election that will have a huge crossroad of which way we go in this country in a great number of areas. And please be an educated part of it.
Senator, real quick, plug your website and your Twitter handle and any way that people, if they want to reach out to you to get more information, stuff that they can do to reach out to you.
They can go to my website, GlennGruenhagen.com, and they can find me on Twitter at Senator Glenn Gruenhagen. I don't have that right in front of me, but
that's
I
think
it's Senator Glenn Gruenhagen.
That's good. Senator, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come and educate us in Mississippi about some of the things Tim Walz has done in Minnesota. I thought we'd talk for a segment. We talked for 3. And, sir, I'm really grateful for you. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful for you to get the word out, and I pray for our country in the upcoming election. We've got to go back to the principles our country is founded, the Judeo-Christian principles our country is founded on.
Yep.
And that led to the greatness of our country and built a better future for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. God bless you and your listeners.
And with that, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back on WYAB.